Okay, today you're getting the opportunity to meet someone and listen to their life story, who survived and lived through a period of history which you hopefully never have to imagine such a thing. He is been coming to the school for over the past 16 years. So the first time that he came to speak to West Hill was in 2010, ancient time ago. Some of you weren't even born back then. And he's been coming on and off to visit since then to share his experience with us. So I'm not going to take up much time because he's the one who you're here for. I'll let him say something also about himself. But just think, this is what 90 years young looks like.
Wow.
And he chose to leave his house today to come speak to the students of West Hill High School. Yep.
You can go to the next one. So good morning.
Good morning.
I had to leave New Haven an hour before I usually would leave. Merritt Parkway is an awful road. So to get 39 miles took me an hour and a half. So it wasn't an easy ride. Anyway, my nickname is Endre. My Hungarian name is Endre. Last name is Sarkany, pronounced Sarkany in this country. I was born in October 31st. Have no idea what Halloween was. 1936. So this Halloween, God willing, your teacher said, I will be 90 years young. And don't forget, the 90 is only a number. Young, it's important. Okay, I have been giving talks in a public school environment. It's not exclusively the public schools, for close to 20 years, even though it says I didn't update the slide. I give talks in churches, synagogues, public libraries, and other events when people invite me. The topic I am trying to address with a big paintbrush for you to understand what really happened in about a 30-year period from 1930 to 1960. After 1960, I will not talk too much about it. But that was Second World War. The fascist Nazi government of Germany, Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union, and the whole European theater was in turmoil over that period of time. Important part is that I give close to 80 talks a school year to students like you. It's important because what happened during the Nazi fascist government of Germany, the killing and the devastation, it needs to be known, and we cannot forget what happened during that period of time. And we need to strive for that those things never happen again. So it is significant. The future is you. You go out to college and what have you, and you can build a wonderful future in this country, and I call him the greatest country in the world. And don't ever forget it, the privilege that you are living here. Every morning when I get up, I say two things. First, getting out of bed, I say, thanks God, I was able to get out of bed. Number two, then I'm living in the greatest country in the world. I am married, and God willing, in July 6th, I will be married to the same lady for 56 years. Marriage is a tough job. It's not all love. It's work. So don't rush into it unless if you know what you're doing. Okay. My wife and I, we have 2 grown children. They have their own families. Both of our children are professionals. Our son is a radiologist. Our daughter is a clinical psychologist. We have 5 grandchildren. The youngest one is just graduating from high school. The oldest one is working on her PhD in forensic psychology. And then we have, between them, 3 of them already graduated from college. So a little geography, so making it sure you know what country I'm talking about, that little circle. Geography and history is holding hands. They cannot live without each other. That little country now, it used to be 3 times as big as it is, if you're looking at maps for about 100 years. The next slide will show you a little more detailed. You have Austria in the west, capital city of Vienna. Then in the north, when I lived in Europe, it used to be called Czechoslovakia. Now it's 2 countries. What you see, Slovakia, maybe about 70 years ago, that was part of Hungary. Then you move to the east, you have Ukraine. A large portion of that Ukraine over here also was part of Hungary. Remember, we had First World War, Second World War, and other conflicts when borders just move around. Then you have Romania. This portion is called Transylvania at one point. That was Hungary. The major change really took place when Bill Clinton was president. You see this part? The Southwest. It used to be called Yugoslavia. I mentioned Yugoslavia was run by Boris Tito, a different type of a dictator than Joseph Stalin was. Because Joseph Stalin was a brutal person. Under his leadership, millions of Russians died. So you see over 8 countries now, instead of 1. The closest one to Hungary is Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia. The Danube, which is the 2nd largest river in Europe, is coming from the Black Forest, which is in Germany, someplace over here, wiggles through over here to Austria, and it takes a 90-degree turn in Hungary.
When you touch it,
Yeah.
that's what happens.
And go to the Black Sea. Budapest is about 50 miles south of the Dogleg. On the west side, it used to be called Buda, the east side Pest. Mid-1800s, the 2 cities joined, creating Budapest. Okay, the next slide is something very important to you particularly. Okay, you cannot be in your life a bystander. You got to be an upstander. If something is really bothering you, it doesn't really matter how little or how big. You need to speak up. You need to have the courage to get up and say, this is wrong. We are living in very tough times, particularly now in the 21st century. I never thought it will happen. But you have to be vigilant, no procrastination, just get up and do what you need to do. Because if not, here is a poem written by a German Lutheran minister which will tell you who is a bystander. Bystander, he is not doing anything for himself, to society at large. And he says, first they came for the communists, and I did not object because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists and didn't object because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the labor leaders, and I did not object because I wasn't a labor leader. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't do anything because I wasn't a Jew. The last 2 lines is significant, and remember, they came for me, and there was no one left to object. See, if you don't do anything about the issues which you are facing, that's what happens. That's what exactly happened during Second World War. So then let's look at the next slide, please. Here is the book. Elie Wiesel received the Nobel Peace Prize for all of his efforts for humanity, was fighting against hate, bigotry, anti-Semitism, and prejudice. The gentleman passed away a few years ago. I had the privilege of knowing him. Here is the book. It's only 99 pages, extremely well written. And if you really want to learn history about the period of time of 1933 to 1945, you will be able to get a clear picture. He was deported with his family as a 12-year-old boy all around in Europe. And thanks God he survived. I had the privilege not only knowing him, I knew his son and his grandson. So it is very important. Here is a quotation from the book. That is providing a relationship between you and I. We are distant cousins. Here is the quotation. Whoever listens to witness becomes a witness. I am the first part. I was a 7-8-year-old little kid who survived and faced the Nazi occupation of Hungary and the creation of the Budapest ghetto and a life around it. The second part is you, because you can make a difference. Why I really emphasize this? Because in this time, in the 21st century, there are too many people who will say that the Holocaust did not happen. It's a hoax. Jews making it up. Let's go to the next slide. 6 million innocent persons, young and old, were slaughtered by the fascist Nazi government of Germany. Jewish people have two sayings: never forget and never again. It's significant. There are Holocaust deniers, important, so-called important people in social media today who are anti-Semites and pretty much a denial of the Holocaust. Here are just a few names. Tucker Carlson, a former Fox contributor. Nick Fuentes openly says, "I hate the Jews." Kanye West, he has a new name now, whatever that is. Megyn Kelly, they were well-known people on television and on social media. They have over millions of followers. They corrupt the young people's mind about history and reality. So please remember that what happened never should have happened. In related to history, Winston Churchill was a Prime Minister of England during the Second World War. And in one of his speeches, he said very simple: those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Why this is important? Because after Second World War, we all thought then the world will be able to live in peace. But since 1945 to up to now, there are at least 80 major conflicts existed in the world. And there are conflicts going on right now when innocent people are dying. And we need to prevent that. And we have the tools to do so. Just as a quick reminder, in the United States, we have an election every 2 years, not 4, 2. And we can change the government in every 2 years. If something you don't like and you are able to vote, don't miss it. It's your and our obligation to follow through. Never again is always referred to the Holocaust. What happened during those years and the killing of 6 million. We were hoping that it really never going to happen. But believe it or not, October 7th of 2023, on that day, it was a Jewish holiday, I was in a synagogue. At night, after services, we were ready to leave. And the rabbi said, everybody stays. And we didn't know what's going on. And when everybody sit back, he made an announcement. Then in a music festival in Israel, on that day, there are the thugs, barbaric behavior of these so-called people, loosely used, killed over 1,200 innocent people, young and old. Took about 250 of them hostages. Brutal. They call the Hamas. I cannot even call them animals because I don't want to hurt the animals by calling that way. And clearly they are not human beings. So this kind of barbaric behavior is not tolerable in the world. And we have the ways to change it. The next slide is show you this very simple fact that in January 30th of 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. Jewish life almost immediately fallen into the pits. Hitler has an ideology of creating a superior race. I have no idea what it means. Alienation. I call him racial purification. So we need to understand his ideology. He not only targeted to kill all the Jews, not only in Germany, all around, because he had an ideal to take over the whole world. And by 1941, all European countries either were occupied by Nazi Germany or they were under the influence of Hitler's ideology. There were only two countries, Sweden and Switzerland, who were neutral. And they played a major role in many ways of that period of time. But Hitler not only targeted the Jews, I said, the Slovaks, the blacks, Jehovah's Witnesses, the handicapped, political prisoners, the gypsies. Sometimes they refer to them, the Romans. Would you believe it? Besides the 6+ million Jews, he exterminated over 6 million non-Jews. We need to recognize that. And because of the war of the period of time, there are additional 6 million people died because of the war, Second World War. 18 million human beings. A brain drain. Can you imagine if those people survived, what kind of a world we would be living? Creative, positive, moving forward. But it didn't happen. The next slide is a significant one in my point of view related to the Holocaust. It's called Kristallnacht. German word translated to English, the night of the broken glass. Took place in November night of 1938. On that day, the German government, the Nazi fascist government of Germany, organized programs. Small group of Germans were sent all around in the country. To do what? Break into Jewish homes, destroy Jewish properties, verbally, physically abuse the Jewish people, burn down synagogues and Jewish institutions. That spread around in Europe very quickly afterwards. Just a couple of quick examples. A synagogue was lit up and was burning. Thousands of people were looking and clapping. The firefighters were very close by, didn't move an inch, and they enjoyed the total destruction. Jewish people were dragged out of their homes, making it sure that they are bringing their toothbrushes. Why? Our streets were not covered with asphalt. They were cobblestones. And they made the Jews get down on their knees and clean the cobblestones by toothbrushes. Thousands of people in the sidewalks were looking and making mockery of the Jews. An unbelievable environment. So we need to understand the brutality what the Nazis did. The next slide is just very simple, showing a couple of stores broken in. But I like to bring to your attention a symbol up in the right-hand corner. And please, never forget that symbol. It's called the swastika. It represents the fascist Nazi government of Germany. You can see that swastika in the 21st century in this country. So it didn't disappear, Hitler's ideology. I'd like to describe that swastika with two words. Please remember those two words. Hate and killing. Now you know what killing is. But do you know what hate means? We use that four-letter word, H-E-T-E, so commonly that we don't even realize what we are saying. You walk in a mall, you see in a window, and holy behold, you see something, and say, I hate it. No, you don't. You dislike it. Make sure that you use the English language properly. I'm still learning it after 70 years. Thanks God for Google. Every day I look something up and I learn a new word. What really is the point here, that the hate has different attributes. And here are those. Evil, vicious, cruel, violent, brutal, abuse, and nasty. Now, if you understand these words, then you exactly know what that one word, four-letter word, means. So I would like to suggest to you to replace that four-letter word with two other four-letter words. Love and hope. Because those words have real meaning to your life. Today, tomorrow, and rest of your life. And you will be a happy camper when you know what it means. And here are the attributes I put to it. Trust, respect, care, honor, compromise, outreach, and stability. When you understand those words, you know they are all constructive, all positive, and would make you happy, successful, rest of your life. That's what is really significant. So, let's talk about briefly Hungary. The next slide shows you that a Hungarian leader, Miklos Horthy, met Horthy. They met more than one time in the late 1930s. And Horthy made a commitment to Hitler. Then a Hungarian population, a nation of Hungary, will follow the ideology what Hitler put forth, namely killing the Jews. And not only that, then Hungary will participate and supporting the Nazi fascist government of Germany during Second World War. This man was deposed late 1943, early 1944. And Hungary received a puppet government put by the Nazis. And it was a devastating government. Now let's talk about my family. You see this building? It's 300 years old. It's still there. I took my family there. My wife and I, we took our family there 3 years ago to show them where we grown up. My family moved into this building in 1940. The significance of the building, then its location. It is the 7th district of Budapest, and sometimes we refer to it as the Jewish quarter. In the ground floor here, you see a kindergarten nursery school. You know what? I went to kindergarten there, and it's still a kindergarten today. The top floor was an acrobat, ballet, and a dance studio. See, it had a lot of empty space. Eventually, by late 1943, that building became an orphanage for over 150 Jewish children, ages about 3 to 14. So this building has significance, and I will elaborate on the significance later on. After 1943, when we moved in, my father, who had a small construction business, the Nazis revoked his license. So he had no way to make a living. Had very difficult to able to make enough money to put food on the table and able to pay the rent. And later on in 1940s, by 1943, 1944 beginning, he was taken to a concentration camp. Devastating. Over that period of time, my mother was to sort of prepare me that I am not going to see my father ever. You see this building? It's 2 blocks away from the other building. In the fall of 1943, my mother enrolled me to 1st grade, and she walked with me for the 2 blocks. And after a couple of weeks, she said, Andy, you can walk to your school on your own. Here is that little guy over here, 7 years old. So she dressed me up, gave me a book bag, a small one, and I started to walk to school on my own. And after about 3-4 days, I truly felt sick, inside and outside. Let me describe to you. On that 2 blocks walking, by the way, I never had to worry about cars. We barely have seen a car. I had to more worry about horse and buggies. So on my walk, people started to saying all kinds of slogans. That to the Jews. The Jews are useless. They are destroying our country. They are taking away our livelihood. Anti-Semitism, which existed very much at that time. Some people spit on me, pushed me to the pavement, slapped me around. Remember, I'm a 7-year-old kid, go to school to learn, read, write, and arithmetic. But why this has happened? I'll tell you why. Because I'm a Jew, and I'm a very proud Jew. I was, because I was brought up that way. I am today, and I will be forever. You need to know your heritage. You need to look back who you are to be able to figure things out for the future. Do a family tree. Ask your parents, grandparents, whoever is in a family existence today. It's important in your life today and the rest of your life. That was a devastating time for me. The relationship between Hungary and Nazi Germany deteriorated very fast. Hitler was very unhappy with the Hungarian government because they didn't fulfill the commitment they had made in the late 1930s. And he decided with his military that it's time to occupy Hungary. Prior to occupation, the radio and newspaper were all telling to the nation, we must welcome the Germans. They are going to come and making sure that we will have prosperity, we will have wealth, we will be able to live in peace. And the next slide shows you that on March 19 to 1944, they marched in to Budapest and took control of the country. A significant city geography. The Danube is going from north to south. There was a beautiful boulevard called the Ring Road, consists of over 4 different avenues. It's called the Ring Road. A semicircle go from the north part of the river Danube to the south part. I have seen how the Nazis came in. My grandfather took me out to the Ring Road, and I was standing there with thousands of other people. And they were having black boots, guns, marching in goose steps. And look at it. All of them had an armband. And what is on the armband? The swastika, meaning hate and killing. That's what they represented. After a short time, my grandfather said, "I'll take you home. You have seen more than enough." And on the way home, walking 3 blocks, he says, "Our life as Jews will permanently change." And I had no idea what he was talking about. But this happened in 82 years ago, and I have not forgotten. It's the memory cell which keeps this information permanently. So look at, never forget what the Nazis did. Let's freeze history in March of 1944. Let's look at the next slide, please. On August 11, 2017, I went home from work, turned on the television to listen to the news, and I couldn't believe what I have seen and what I have heard. Look at the picture. White supremacists, these thugs. We have over 50 major white supremacist groups. They hate the Jews, they hate the blacks, they hate the Muslims, they hate Asian Americans. They would love to get rid of all of us. They created a march in Charlottesville, Virginia. Look at it. Look at the flag, the Nazi flag, 21st century. And you should be a proud American and understand American history. I lived in the South, and I traveled the South extensively. So when you see the Confederate flag, that's an order no-no. So you need to understand your position today with respect to history. The next slide, when you see these thugs marching and saying the same slogans which I have heard as a 7-year-old. Death to the Jews. The Jews are bloodsuckers. They're destroying this country, and so forth and so on. Here it is, 21st century. So don't forget that these things, this existing. And anti-Semitism is growing in leaps and bounds on college campuses and in communities. Synagogues are broken in, people were killed just because they are Jews. Let's look at the next slide. And before I will address the picture to the right, I'd like to explain to you something about death camps. Auschwitz cannot be taught by itself. There is a sister city 2 miles apart, 2 villages, called Birkenau. The 2 villages are connected very closely. Auschwitz was a forced labor camp and a concentration camp. And Birkenau held all the gas chambers and the ovens for burning the dead bodies. Here is a talk on January 6, 2021. By the way, I was glued to the television on that day, and I said, I cannot believe that this can happen in this country. My definition of that day is insurrection, destroying this country, taking away our freedom. And this explanation. Here is this thug running around in Washington, D.C., says Camp Auschwitz, but not only that, he's saying something else on the sweatshirt. In German, it says Arbeit macht frei, and it translates to English, work sets you free. The Nazis were telling to the Jews in the camps that if you work hard, you will be liberated. The liberation was then they lined them up to the gas chambers and killed them and burned them to ashes. And if anybody would try to tell you, then it is a hoax. I was in a death camp 3 years ago in Poland, spent 11 days. And I walked up to a monument, a big dome. And when I walked up, I was able to see ashes and bones of human beings and a smell. You cannot deny this. And anybody try to deny it, they're living in a different world than you and I. The other one, I put it in there because I felt that it is important to know the kind of brutality took place that day. These white supremacist thugs were yelling to hang the vice president, Mike Pence. They were attacking his entourage, and our Secret Service was able to save them. They were as close as 60 feet. They truly wanted to take away our freedom. So we need to understand those things. Those white supremacist groups like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and many others. After the occupation of Hungary by the Nazis, Hitler dispatched this guy, Adolf Eichmann. He had one purpose, one mission, to expedite the deportation and the killing of Hungarian Jews. Hungary had a population of about 8.5 million, and about 650,000 were Jews. Jewish people lived in the major cities and the periphery of the cities. When he arrived, he was able to organize like an assembly line process to ship over 550,000 Hungarian Jews, and practically all of them ended up in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And people who get there, maybe 1% survived. This man also were declaring openly that with my organization, we killed over 5 million human beings. He wasn't a small figure in the Nazi government. It was a major element. So let's go to the next slide, please. Here is a map of Europe. And here is Auschwitz-Birkenau. Here is Majdanek, which I talked about. In the southern part of Austria, it was another extermination camp called Mauthausen. In Germany, 3 major ones, Bergen-Belsen. Yeah. No, Buchenwald and Dachau. These camps were major camps where Jews were killed and burned to ashes. In Germany, almost every village had ways and means to exterminate the Jews. The next slide is very, very precious. You can see on the left side a picture of my mother and my father. I was 4 years old at the time. My mother was born in this small village called Dunaharaszti, about 7 miles south on the east side of the river Danube from Budapest. The significance of the village was that practically everybody spoke a distinct German dialogue called Schwab. Swabia actually located in the southwest corner of Germany. It was so distinct that many average Germans had difficulty of understanding it. It played a major role of saving lives. My parents got married in that village. When you are looking at the picture on the right, you can read it. My father in the far right. I couldn't identify what camp it was, but I know then the transport just have arrived. Why? Because when a transport arrived and the Jews were taken off from the train, freight car, or I call them cattle cars, they confiscated everything from them, even in their clothing, give them striped uniforms, and put them to slave labor. And some of them were killed. But they are still wearing civilian clothing. So I know that they just have arrived. The next slide, I show you a cattle car. Let them sleep. They don't sleep all night long. By the way, if you don't want to be here, you can get up and leave. It's free. Doesn't cost you any money. So the next slide, I show you a cattle car or a freight car. This is real, not make-believe. This particular cargo car, what you see in a picture, is located in Birkenau. I walked up and I touched it, and I knew what was happening. I was crying and shaking because hundreds of Jews were shipped into their death in that cargo car. Just unbelievable. So when we are talking about denial, you cannot deny. Practically every business in Germany used Jews as slave laborers. It's just overwhelming, the kind of thing the Nazis did. Let's look at the next slide. These three pictures is basically related to the Hungarian Jews. The Jews were taken from their homes, taken to a collection place, processed them, and then to a railroad station and shipped them to various concentration camps and death camps. The train sometimes took 3, 4, even 5 days to get its destination. Many died. There was no water, no food, no facilities. They were cramped in there like sardines. Unbelievable. But that's what they did. Here is the picture when they arrived. After when they arrived, they went through a very specific process. German physicians, German officers, and selected people went through the crowd and picked people up for medical experiments. These people were taken into a makeshift hospitals and a makeshift infirmaries, and German doctors performed procedures and injected them all kinds of liquids and seeing what the Jews going to react. They were healthy people up to that point. The ringleader of these facilities were Joseph Mengele. He had a nickname, the Angel of Death. Anybody who get there didn't come out alive, less than 1%. Devastating. Physicians, they were supposed to heal people, and they were killing them. The remaining people, first, man was put one side, the woman put on the other side. And within each group, able-bodied people who could do slave labor to one side, weakling, the elderly, the children, handicapped, put on the other side. People who could do slave labor, took them away, give them a striped uniform, and put them to work. The rest of them were said, you need to take a shower, clean up, and we will give you a uniform and put you some work. That meant to landing them up to the gas chambers, and they were dead in a short period of time. To tell you how the killing was done in the gas chambers. Initially, the Germans used carbon monoxide, exhaust fumes for automobiles and trucks. It killed very slowly. These gas chambers was holding maybe 120, 130 individuals crammed in there. Later on, they used cyanide gas, which was a little bit faster. But then, later on, they found a rat poisoning, a crystal called cyclone B. And these crystals were poured into the gas chamber, and the body heat of the people who were crammed in there created fumes. And those fumes killed people in less than 30 minutes. So it was an awful process what they went through. And people really were suffering, particularly with exhaust fumes. Just remember, then there is no vaccine against that four-letter word, HATE. It's not like you can go to the doctor and get a shot and everything goes away. You and I have to work very hard every day to eliminate it, and it is our job to do so. It's significant. So let's look at the next slide, please. The Hungarian government issued a law in April 5th, 1944, that every Jew in a country must wear a yellow star in the left-hand side of the outer garment. I did wear it. It was a very uncomfortable situation because I was singled out with that star. And if you left your home, whatever reason, they know you are a Jew. And if you didn't wear a yellow star and they caught you, it was a death sentence, instantaneously. The Nazis didn't ask permission or having any kind of a law provided them support. They just took their pistol away and put it into your head. That's how they behaved. The brutality. That was a devastating time for the whole country. Now let's look at the next slide, please. The only bright moment in 1944, then the Swedish government dispatched Raoul Wallenberg in July of 1944 to protect Swedish properties in Hungary. When he arrived, he immediately understood what the Nazis are doing. And he made a commitment, I'm going to save as many Jews as possible. He, with his team, saved over 80,000 Hungarian Jews from their death. Fast forward, where the war ended in late June, early July, he was called by the Soviets to a meeting. He attended, and as soon as he arrived, the Soviets captured him, accused him of CIA spy, and we never have heard about him afterwards. He more likely died in the Gulag, but we have nothing concrete about it. But he was a hero, not only for the Jews, but also for humanity. The next slide only show you a collection of pictures of the city of Budapest in the summer of 1944. You can see a railroad station, a building labeled Jewish, and how the Jews were rounded up, taken to collection places. How we were moving toward the late summer, early fall, the Hungarian government issued an additional law, particularly in respect to Jews of Budapest. They said all the Jews of Budapest must move into a specific territory. It's called the Budapest Ghetto. The size is 74 acres. And you can go to a computer and figure out how small it is. And the non-Jews were asked to move out. All the streets over here, what you can see around, they were all blockaded by a 7-foot stone wall. There were only 4 gates, and the gates were guarded inside and outside by guards with guns. So you see 2 red circles. The red circle with the plus sign is the building where my family moved in 1940 and became an orphanage for 150 plus Jewish kids. The other circle, red circle, nothing in it, it was a school I went to a very short period of time. This ghetto provided a certain level of safety for the Jews. I will tell you a few stories related to the ghetto, but I have to drink a lot of water. The first story is affected me directly. It could have been end of September or beginning of October. By the way, we children were kept underground. Every building had a storage area for heating material, coal or wood. That's how we were heating our apartments during the winter time. It wasn't like a basement or a cellar. It was wet clay flooring, which wasn't very smooth. There was one light bulb in there and 2 small windows for ventilation in our building. We were kept there 24/7. We were told that we cannot allow to open our mouth, no talking. And we were explained that for safety reasons. Thanks God for cots and blankets from the kindergarten school. Then we didn't have to lay down in a wet clay flooring. We were fed 1 meal a day. We were always hungry. We were always cold. We were always shaking what happens the next moment. Because the Hungarian German Nazis were coming into the building regularly, 2-3 times a week, arbitrarily, rounded up all the adults, took them to the courtyard, put them to the wall, facing it, hands up. They had guns, they could kill. Thanks God, it was more physical and verbal abuse. And holy behold, they never realized that there are 150 plus kids hiding in the basement because we kept our mouth shut. And that's we understood very quickly to protect our lives. And this happened often. A major activity took place with me. It could have been end of September, beginning of October. We were allowed to play in a courtyard. The weather was nice. And how we were running around, I hit my head and it started to bleed very badly. And my mother, Clara, panicked. What am I going to do? But there was no way out, or no way to try to save. My kindergarten teacher, Rose, said, Clara, I take care of Wendy. Immediately removed the yellow star from my outer garment. People tried to patch up my bleeding head for the first aid which was available. And Rose told me, you look down, you walk with me, and hold my hand as hard as you can. And we left the building. And I knew then I had to wear the yellow star all the time and never leave the building. But all those two were violated. And we were dashing close to the gate, Anita's gate. And when we get there, the Nazi guard yelled, show me your ID. So Rose does. And then the guard paused and says, but you are not a Jew. The law stated that you need to move out. And Rose very calmly said, I lost my husband a few years back. I have no place to go. And can't you see, my son's head is bleeding and I'm trying to take him to the hospital. And they carried the conversation. In the meanwhile, I was hysterical and was crying. And eventually the guard let us out. We walked about 6 or 7 more blocks to the hospital. The doctors patched me up. And on the way back, the guard asked the same set of questions. But eventually, Rose prevailed, and we were let in. The moral of the story is significant. Number 1, Rose never was married. She was a spinster, had no interest in marriage, but loved children, and we loved her in kindergarten. Number 2, she was a devoted Catholic, never missed a mass. And number 3, she was truly a human being, had a heart, understood what was going on. And she was willing to sacrifice her life to save the life of that Jewish boy who's talking to you today. Because without her, I would not be around. So you need to take advantage of what's going on. Here was a very kind person. When I went back to Hungary the first time, I looked her up immediately. I kissed her and hugged her, and I said, there is no words or deeds can be said or done what we have done for my family. The war was going on. The airplanes were flying over. Bombardment. Our building, during about a 4-month period, was hit 4 times. The top floor was completely destroyed. We had radio, but we couldn't listen to news. Why? Because the Nazis were jamming the wavelength. It was unbearable. And we were always afraid what's the next moment going to bring. The next issue, I appreciate if you don't talk. I know it's a long presentation, but you should be able to keep weak and not talking. The second situation took place, could have been in late October, beginning of November. These thugs were coming into the building, rounded up all the adults, went to apartment to apartment to apartment, not realizing the kids were hiding. And they took them away to a collection place. And thousands of Jews were lined up there. And they know what's going to happen. They will go a process, and after that, they will be taken to a railroad station and shipped them to some concentration camp or death camp. But holy behold, my grandmother from the village, who spent the time with us in the ghetto, have noticed an SS guard, and she just dashed up to him and started to speak in this strange German dialect called Schwab. And the SS guard immediately was stunned and said, "What are you doing here? You are not a Jew. Go home." But my grandmother was very quick on her feet. And she said, "My cousins and my sisters are in line. We came up from the village of Dunaharasti. Hopefully then the city of Budapest will provide safety. And this morning they just came and took us away. I have no idea what's going on." And SS God says, "Take your family and go home." So that special dialogue I was talking to you about, it saved everybody's life who lived in our building. And when the adults came back, of course the children were thrilled. It just was a happy moment. The war was keep going on. The noise from the bombardment, the gunshot wound, it just was unbelievable. How we were moving toward December, things sort of slowed down. And we had a hunch that the war has to come to an end, but we didn't know exactly when. The holy behold, these thugs came in and rounded up the adults just before Christmas time, took them away to another collection place. And they were standing in there and knowing what's going to happen. And only miracle could save their life. They came in a late afternoon, and you know it gets dark in December in late afternoon. How they were standing and shaking and understanding the future. The last speaker came on and said, "We cannot process everybody, it's too dark. Who is not processed, go home, we get you tomorrow." And everybody who was taken away from our building returned. It's really a miracle. And how we were moving toward end of the year and turning to January, things got very quiet. And on January 17th of 1945, there are 2 husky persons walked into our courtyard and was telling with body language that a Budapest ghetto is liberated. They were Soviet troops. Sometimes we refer them Red Army. Hungary was liberated by the Soviets by end of February. The war actually ended around end of June and beginning of July. So what we are going to do, my grandmother from the village said, "I walk back to the village and see if my store is still existing and my home." I walked back about 7 miles. And when she arrived, one of her neighbors was a dear friend of hers, a farmer's wife, not Jewish. They were good friends. Have noticed her. She dashed out of her house, hugged her, kissed her, and said, "Welcome home. Thanks God, you survived." And carried a conversation. And unfortunately, she had to tell a sad story. And let's look at the next slide. First, let me just show you two quick pictures. Here is a makeshift gate. You can see ghetto, the Jewish star, the God. And the next slide shows you the 7-foot stone wall, which you couldn't possibly climb. This wall, what you see here, was actually found in the urban renewal of Budapest in 1962. Now let's go to the next slide. My grandmother owned that white dog. My cousin Don, who is on the right, and that little guy is me, we played with the dog all the time, just like you would play with a pet, what you have. We loved the dog. And the friendly neighbor said, what happened? The war was almost over. The other neighbor was a Hungarian Nazi. He noticed the dog, which came around regularly to look for life and food. The friendly neighbor fed the dog, but there was nobody lived in a house. He noticed the dog, went back to his house, got his gun, and guess what? Killed the dog. And a friendly neighbor had noticed it. Said, what did you do that for? And I paraphrase what my grandmother said. He said, it belonged to a Jew. It must be killed. This is that 4-letter means. Don't ever forget it, and don't ever use it. I usually tell to the students like you, have a piggy bank, and every time when you accidentally say that 4-letter word, put a coin in there. I hope you are not going to get rich. And keep that in mind. So after that incident, my grandmother walked back to the village and took my cousin Tom and I to go to school there. Thanks God, my grandmother's general store survived the war. And the building where she lived in wasn't too badly damaged. So we went back. And the next slide will show you my second great picture. Look at that unique character. That was me. We were able to get along very well. Nuns and priests who were our teachers. Was no problem. We kids were able to play all the time, peacefully, running around barefooted, go to the river Danube and learning to swim, and just having a good time. So I like to tell you, there is no bullying allowed at any time. We have the responsibility to respect each other and honor each other. We may disagree with each other, but that's perfectly all right. But nothing physical and nothing vulgar. It's significant. Very simple example. In my junior year in college, I was dating a lovely lady. She was on the plump side. You wouldn't dare to call her fat because I would have beat a daylight out of you. The second quick example, my best friend was the center of a basketball team. He was 6'8". I am 5'3". We always were together, hang around, go downtown, play pool, just having a good time. You wouldn't call him a giraffe, and you don't call me a shrimp, because we would not tolerate either one of them. So what the tongue, what comes out of your mouth? First, you should think before you speak, because what you speak is not only can hurt people, but it actually can kill. There are quite a few youngsters committed suicide from the verbal harassment, what other youngsters did. So you need to understand what those words mean. Be careful. Furthermore, social media is pure trash. I designed computers for 25 years with the IBM Corporation. I know what a computer is. Use it for your benefit of learning, getting information. But all the opinions, what you read there is garbage. Everybody has an opinion. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in facts. The newscast should be factual and not whoever is saying an opinion. So watch out with yourself from what you have. It can be devastating. So what happened with my father? There was no words. My mother visited me regularly. And end of June, when she came, she said, Andy, I take you home. The building was rebuilt. And on the train, how we were coming home, she said, I need to teach you a few things. Number one, how to shop. Number two, how to clean. Number three, how to cook. Remember, I'm 7.5. A little guy like that. But she explained, I will give you the money, and you have to do exactly what I told you. So when mother gave me a list to shop, an example, if she wrote down egg, that meant 1 egg, not a dozen. If she wrote down a half a pound of sugar, it meant a half a pound. Because the money what my mother was earning was calculated out to the penny. Cleaning, you had to have hot water. I had to go down to the dungeon area, get the wood, chop it up, and build a fire in our wood stove. When you had hot water, put it in a bucket, get down on your knee with soap and scrubbing with a brush. That's how you did the cleaning. So whatever conveniences you have, make sure you appreciate it. And you appreciate what your parents are doing. Because they are working for you. You may not agree with it, but they do everything under the sun for the benefit of your life. Thirdly, cooking. She taught me exactly what to do, how to peel a potato, how to cut up onions, how to clean the carrots and so forth, to prepare everything for her when she comes home from work, to be able to finish preparing the food. I actually learned to cook Hungarian food, and I still do. So these are the things. Just to show you one quick example. You go home, open a refrigerator, and you get a refreshing drink. You don't even think about it. For me, my mother gave me money, and every morning a vendor came into our courtyard and yelled, ice! And I had to dash down from the top floor to the ground floor and buy a piece of ice, what my mother gave me. I had to chop it up and put it into what? Called the ice box. 2 words, ice box. It's a 2 compartments on 4 legs, 1 for ice and 1 for food. It may have lasted 1 day. So these are the conveniences what you have. You better appreciate it. Don't take it for granted. And furthermore, if your parents tell you to do something, no talk back. Just do it. That's your job. But number 1 job what you have is studying, because knowledge cannot be taken away from you. Everything else can. So, one day, in the beginning of July of 1945, the same Rose who saved my life was yelling top of her lung my mother's name. Hey, Clara, Clara, Clara. So we dashed out of our house to the corridor. And then she says, your husband, Steve, is home. It took for a while for me to register, because I was prepared not to see my father ever. When it finally was able to hold on myself, I dashed from the top floor to the ground floor faster than any rocket ever could move. I hugged the man who was standing there. I was crying. It was awful. And I looked at him, and when I took 3 steps back, I did not recognize my own father. He may have weighed at 70 pounds, had a baggy clothes. He was liberated by the American military in a death camp called Mauthausen, where he spent close to a year there. Devastating. I described to you what 70 pounds is. My cardiologist requested me to get on a scale twice a week. I had a major heart attack 8 years ago. So when I get on my birthday suit, I weigh 129 pounds. Now can you imagine somebody standing next to me who's 60 pounds lighter? Skin and bone. It took my mother over a year to nourish him back to some human entity. During that period of time, he was yelling, crying, hollering. It was unbearable to listen. And my mother said, Endre, leave Daddy alone. He's reliving the horrors, what he went through for the days, weeks, and months in a death camp. He was finally able to rebuild his business with his father. Then things calmed down. I went to school. However, the political environment in Hungary was liquid. What I mean by that, then from 1945 to 1950, there were 5 different governments took place in the country. Unfortunately, by late 1950, the Hungarian Communist Party took over. That's Soviet communism. Now, I have no time to trying to elaborate the difference between capitalism and communism. But one thing I can tell you, when the communists took over, they confiscated all private properties. So suppose your parent owned a business. They just took in and they said, you leave. It didn't belong to you anymore. Everybody had to work, and the salaries were determined by the government. Everything was government run. Brutality. I went to high school 51 to 55. And when I was senior, I applied to go to university. I was rejected. And a simple phrase which I never forget, undesirable element of society. That's how I was labeled. What the heck it means? Let's look at this slide. Number 1, this is my original birth certificate. Okay. Here is my name, sex, and religion. The next slide is the translation of my birth certificate. I used to become citizen with this document. Here is my name, sex, and religion. Number 2, my father was labeled as capitalist, which was against the whole ideal of Soviet communism. And let's go to the next slide. The conditions in Hungary by 1956 loosened up. Soviets felt then they cannot put any more pressure on the Hungarians. And that's created the Hungarian Revolution, took place in October 23rd of 1956. It took 8 days. During that period of time, then over 50,000 Hungarians died in Budapest in a fighting, and over 250,000 Hungarians escaped the country to Austria. October 31st, victory celebration. The Soviet troops removed themselves to the periphery, to the various camps where they were actually housed. But we haven't seen them anymore. But by November 15, they returned with vengeance, tanks, armored vehicles, and thousands of troops, and destroyed everything what the revolution achieved. And here is the defeat. And on November 23rd, I told my parents, I have no future in this country. And I escaped. I am willing to take a risk of my life. And let's look at the next slide, please. I was able to escape. The distance between Budapest and Vienna is 160 miles. It took about 5 weeks for me to get there. When I get there, I was able to get to the American embassy, obtain legal documents as a Hungarian refugee to come to the greatest country in the world, called the United States of America. And this is the ship I came across. It took us 18 days. I described you the last day. Because I was seasick, I was able to volunteer in a kitchen or a housekeeping, and I had a good time. On the last day, I am on a top deck, enjoying the salty air and seeing ships going east and west. But holy behold, I have seen something even more beautiful. And go to the next slide, please. I'm looking at, I recognize this wonderful lady. She's the most beautiful woman I ever have seen. I told my wife, honey, you are second. This lady represents something very significant for all of us. There is a poem. Are you in a hurry? Are you in a hurry? Get out of here. There is a plaque. A poem is written by a Jewish lady, Emma Lazarus. And it's very simple, saying what America is. Okay? And let me read it to you. Give me you tired, you poor, your hollow masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest towards to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. That poem represents who we are, Americans. After being in America, I went to college. My degree is in mathematics and physics. Eventually worked for IBM Corporation with an advanced degree in computer science. So I know all about computers, and I hope I will forget most of it. In 1961, I became citizen. I was able to bring my parents to this country, and we had a wonderful dinner together. My mother, my father, my little sister, she's 12 years younger than I am, and my grandmother, who was 89. And we enjoyed the Sabbath dinner and celebrating. Then we survived. And I comment, Hitler didn't succeed it, because I got married, I have children, my children get married and have children, and my grandchildren are get married, and actually one of them is pregnant. The next slide will show you very quickly. This is all dated, but anti-Semitism and a hatred of Jews is growing in leaps and bounds. And we need to eliminate any kinds of a hatred. And the distinguished congressman passed away a few years ago, a truly civilized leader from the state of Georgia, made it very clear. I believe in freedom of speech, but I also believe that we have an obligation to condemn speech that is racist, bigoted, anti-Semitic, and hateful. So let's go to the next slide, please. Here, the significance is three pictures. I was 75 years young, and a young lady, a colleague of mine, said, Andy, you need to do a triathlon. And I had no idea what it is. And when she explained, I said, I haven't exercised for 40 years. How can I do that? But eventually convinced me. And when a day came, which was July 6th, in a quasi-amusement park, I participated. I was the oldest one, the youngest one was 13. Over 400. And when a whistle blowed, I said, God, please help me to get through the first part, swimming over 6 miles, a half a mile, a little longer in open water in a lake. Look at it, I'm coming out. And I went to the bike, and I said, please, God, help me to get through leg 2, 12 and a half miles of rugged bike riding. Then I came back, I was able to get to do my 5K run, 3.1 miles. It was a very tough one. But the point is, you make commitments, you fulfill it, and you have an obligation to do that. Your job and your commitment is learning. Respect your teachers all the time. You only see them very little. But about 80% of their time, what you don't see, what they are working very hard for your behalf. So the next slide, let's look at it quickly. We were visiting Hungary and Israel. Here is my second cousin and her family, and this is my wife. And we are in Tel Aviv visiting a very dear friend. The gentleman is graduated from Yale Medical School, was born in New Haven, married an Israeli girl. We met somebody whom we didn't see for 30 years. We're our neighbors in Binghamton, New York. The next slide, please. You can see I was running 5Ks after my triathlon. I did 6 triathlons. In 1 year, I actually did 2 almost back to back. This is my wife in Milford, Connecticut. The significant part is that little guy in the glasses had the bar mitzvah. In Jewish tradition, and when a boy becomes 13, they go to a religious ceremony. Not that becoming a man, no. Just learning about religion. You can see me, my wife, behind me is our son, David. This little girl is married and expecting a baby. That little boy is graduated from college and hopefully go to law school in the fall. This little girl is graduating from high school. That's my daughter, her husband. That lady with the black fit, married and working on her PhD for forensic psychology. And that's my grandson, and this grandson is the same as this. So let's go to the next slide, please. Here is something for you to take away. It's important for you to know. Be an independent thinker with self-reliance and high moral standards. Pursue the good and work against evil, and spread the story of a Holocaust survivor to fight against prejudice and hate. So thank you very much, and you were able to listen. And I truly wish you a great deal of success today and for the future. With the last quotation for an American philosopher, Edmund Burke, and listen to it very carefully. The only thing necessary for triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So that's how I told you. The future is yours, and you have an obligation to stand up for it.